Hello and welcome to or back to my library. Today we're going over all of the things that I read in February this month. This was a pretty good reading month for me. I read lots of things. I had a couple of 5 stars, which is great, but I also had a lot of 3 stars, and honestly, I think 3 stars are the worst rating for me personally, because while I may have enjoyed them to some degree, it also just kind of feels like a waste of my time. And that annoys me. So I'm not happy with the amount of 3 stars. 3.5 are fine, but like a 3 star pisses me off. I'm also side-eyeing myself because when I was pulling out the books off my shelf, I've only actually read 2 things off my shelf this month, and I thought that I did way better than that, but apparently not, so my bad. But anyways, let's get into the books, starting with my stats as always. So in February, I read a grand total of 18 books and DNF'd 4, which gave me a total of 5,868 pages with 53 hours of audiobook listening, which is a huge decrease in audiobook hours from the month previous. In January, I listened to 82 hours of audiobooks, so 30 whole hours less, which is nuts, even though my number of books is only off by 1 and my page count is only off by like 1,000. That is a good chunk of time as a difference, but I did read quite a few ebooks this month, so proud of myself for that. That's one of my goals this year, is to read more books with just my eyeballs and not constantly have to rely on the audiobook to keep me focused, so I've definitely been doing that more. So we'll start from the lowest rated up to the highest. I only had one 2.5 star read, which was Our Monsters by Jemma Topaz, which is a fairly short monster fucker romance. Not even a romance, it's just smut basically, with a little bit of a murder mystery happening in the background. It was fine. I didn't love it, but it was entertaining at the very least. I will give it that. It was very fun to read, but it was pure nonsense and absolute chaos and ridiculous. Mostly in the good way, but not fully in the good way. But this one I actually only read because I was doing a little challenge thing that I want to do more often, where when I open up Storygraph, my to be read shelf always refreshes every time that I open the page. So I just picked the first thing that popped up on there, and that was this pick, and it was not that successful, but it's at least off my TBR, so a win's a win. And then I gave 2.75 stars to Meet Me at the Crossroads by Megan Giddings. I don't normally do quarter stars, but in this case I felt like it was needed because a 2.5 star was a little bit harsh, but a 3 star was not harsh enough. So 2.75 stars for this one, mainly because I was so looking forward to this awesome sounding portal fantasy. I love portal fantasy so much. It is my favorite genre. But in this one, every little piece of magic could have been fully removed from the story, and the story would not have changed in the slightest. Follows 2 sisters, they're twins, and a bunch of these doors appear. The one sister ends up going through the door and the other one does not, and the entire story follows the sister who did not go through the door, and it's just her like grieving the loss of her sister and like learning how to live her life without her twin around her. It's just a sad girl lit fic about grief, which was a beautiful story in and of itself, but it was not the story that I was looking for with this one. The doors had literally no point to the story aside from making the synopsis sound more interesting. So definitely a huge letdown for this one, but the writing style was really good, and I did like the side characters and the complicated family dynamics. That was all very well done. It's just not the story that I was looking for, unfortunately, and it's also the second portal fantasy that I've read recently that has done the exact same thing and let me down in the exact same way. The other one being, I still own it. Where are you? The Saint of Bright Doors. This is the exact same thing, where the doors had like nothing to do with the plot, even though the book is literally named after the doors. Anyways, moving on to the 3 stars. I gave 3 stars to Heart of the Sun Warrior by Lynn Tan, which is the sequel to Daughter of the Moon Goddess. I love that first book, but the second book was not it for me. I found the writing style to be very overly dramatic and not in the fun way. It was ridiculous. It felt very theatrical. I had a hard time taking it seriously, and the plot was not good, honestly. In my opinion, I'm not really sure why I gave this one a 3 star instead of lower, but that's what I gave it at the time, so I'll stick with it, I guess. But yeah, this one was not for me, sadly. I am still planning on reading the short story collection in this series, and I'm very glad that this was just a duology. I also gave 3 stars to Ghost Business by DeLuca, which is a sequel to something. That's a great question. What is this a sequel of? Haunted Ever After. It's a sequel to that book. I loved that first book. I thought it was so much fun. These are a series of companion paranormal romances that are set in this town in Florida that is super haunted. The first book was fantastic. It had a really good mix of romance, but also a really, really good story with the ghosts. With the second book, Ghost Business, there could have been no ghosts in this book and it wouldn't have made a difference. It was largely about these two people who are doing like rival businesses. They do like ghost walking tours in this town. And like there were some ghosts in it, but not really, and they weren't really important to the story at all. Whereas in the first book, the story of the ghosts was a really important part to the whole thing, and that was what was so good about it. Whereas this one was just a romance, and it just felt like any other romance out there, sadly. And then my last 3-star was Mem by Bethany C Morrow. I was looking for the newest book by this author, The Body, but that one was not available on Libby right away, but I saw that Mem was, and Mem used to be on my TBR like years ago, and then for some reason I took it off. I guess I just lost interest in it, but it's always kind of been in the back of my mind as a book that I would like to read at some point. So I figured it was available right then. It was pretty short, so I picked it up on a whim, and it was good, but could have been a lot better. I think similar to Meet Me at the Crossroads, the author took this very interesting, super cool, unique idea and then made the book about the most boring parts of it. The setting was really cool. It's set in like 1910s Montreal, and it's about this woman who is a memory that was extracted from somebody else. Normally these memories are only able to replay that one moment in time over and over again until they eventually expire, but for some reason this main character has been the only person who's ever been able to form her own memories and has gone on to be an actual like fully functional human being. This story just felt like a very long prologue to what could have been a really, really good novel, but there just wasn't enough meat in the story to make it really interesting, and that was a bit of a letdown. But I did still enjoy it. I love the writing style for this author, and again, the concept was so unique and interesting that it felt very fresh to read as well, so that was nice. I gave 3.5 stars to The Enchanted Hacienda. I don't really have much to say about this one, to be honest. I'm also questioning why I got 3.5 stars and not a 3-star, but I guess that's what I felt in the moment as well. I really liked everything in this book that was not the romance. I loved the friendship with the elderly couple. I loved the family, her friendships. I loved her kind of breaking up with her horrible ex and like having to fully restart her entire life. Everything to do with her family and the magic and the farm. That was all so wonderful, but the romance really killed this book for me. I didn't think it needed to be a romance at all. I would have been much happier without that in there. And I think all of the other elements of this book were strong enough that it could have been a book without romance, and it easily could have stood on its own without that, but it is what it is. Speaking of romance, I also gave 3.5 stars to Tough Guy by Reid, which is the 3rd book in the Heated Rivalry Game Changers series that I've been obsessed with. This one has definitely been my least favorite book in the series. It was still pretty good, but I liked these two main characters much less than the rest of the main characters in the other books in the series so far. I liked their story. I liked that the one main character, the hockey player, he has really bad anxiety, and the other main character is a musician, very confident person. The two of them were friends when they were teenagers and then are reconnecting now, and I love that kind of second chance romance where the couple never actually dated when they were younger, but it was like a misconnection sort of thing, and now later in life they are reconnecting and exploring what could have been. I love that kind of romance so much, so that part of it definitely works for me, but I just think the characters themselves just weren't quite my vibe, but overall it was still a pretty fun read. Moving on to my 4 stars, I gave 4 stars to Small Spaces by Katherine Arden, which was my buzzword pick for both of the buzzword challenges this month. This one was a very big surprise actually. I really enjoyed it. It's a middle grade horror novel and it was genuinely really scary. I listened to the audiobook for it and there were a couple times where I got that like spine tingly feeling of being watched that I love so much. That feeling is what I'm always looking for when I read horror, and I don't often get it, so I was very surprised that this random middle grade book that I picked up was able to do that for me. And yeah, this was a great book and I am definitely going to continue on in the series. I believe it's a 4-book series, I'm pretty sure, so I'll probably wait until the Halloween season and pick up the rest of them around then. Starsight by Sanderson. This is the 2nd book in the Skyward series, and this one was much better than book 1 for me. I quite enjoyed book 1, but I found the main character to be kind of irritating, but in book 2 she was still irritating, but more in a endearing sort of way, and I loved the plot of this one. I can't really say what it's about because I feel like it might spoil book 1, but the type of sci-fi that this one was is my favorite kind of sci-fi. It was a blast. I had so much fun reading this book, and I am very much looking forward to continuing the series, hopefully soon. House of Hunger by Alexis Henderson. This one is a gothic sapphic vampire book, and I loved the vibes of this one. It was so good. The characters were so well done. It was gruesome and bloody and brutal. It was the perfect kind of gothic atmosphere. My only critique for this one was that I think the first half of the story could have been pushed a little bit farther with the gothic elements to it, and then I also wish that there was more interaction between the main character and the villain of the story, like the vampire overlord lady. I think seeing her just a little bit more would have made this even more horrific than it was. But otherwise, a very solid read, and I can't wait to read more from this author as well. I also gave 4 stars to Dreams of Gods and Monsters by Laini Taylor, which is the third and final book in the what's it called? Daughter of Smoke and Bone series. This one took me a little while to get into because it had been so long since I read book 2, but after a while I did get back into the story pretty easily and I was fully invested. I loved where the plot went for this one. I loved how it ended. This had me on a roller coaster of emotions. It had me sad and crying and so happy in so many parts. It was funny. I loved the side characters so much, especially Mick and Susanna. And yeah, this was a great conclusion and I'm very happy to have finished out the series. And finally, for the 4 stars was A Closed and Common Orbit by Becky Chambers, the sequel to The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. I love this book. It was so good. The first book was definitely better, but this one was still excellent. This is a very slow, character-driven story that I thoroughly enjoyed. I especially loved the flashbacks to Pepper's life and how she got started. That was so interesting. I don't really have much just to say about it, to be honest, but I did really enjoy this book, and I am so looking forward to continuing with the series. Again, hopefully soon, but knowing me, who knows when that'll happen. Moving on to my 4.5 stars, I have 3 this month, starting with Walking Practice by Dolki Min. This one is a very weird horror novel about a shape-shifting alien trapped on Earth who's able to change their body into whatever shape and gender they want, and they use dating apps in order to lure humans to eat them. And it's very gruesome. It is disgusting body horror. Like, this author does not shy away from all of the bloody, gruesome details of eating people and all of the many recipes that the main character makes out of human parts. It was foul and very hard to read. I was doing the audiobook for this one and I had to turn it off while I was eating and doing anything to do with food. I could not handle it. It was so hard to listen to, but it was so well done. And with this book, I cannot recommend the audiobook enough. The narrator did such an incredible performance. It's easily one of the best audiobooks that I've ever listened to. Because the main character is a shapeshifter, sometimes when they are tired and like don't have enough food, their body kind of starts to morph back into its actual form and they start to like melt and stuff. And during those parts, the narrator puts on these really weird, wacky voices that sound all distorted, and there's cool sound effects and all these things. It was a brilliant performance. It was such a unique book in general, but the audiobook really took it to the next level for this one. And yeah, this was easily one of the best horror novels that I've read in quite a long time. It was so good. If you can handle body horror, definitely pick this one up whenever you can. Another 4.5 star horror novel was Wolfworm by T. Kingfisher. I got an advanced listener's copy to this one for the audiobook, and it was so good. Oh my god, this was amazing. Also a very gross body horror novel. I used to not be able to handle body horror whatsoever, and I'm very glad that I'm able to now because I actually quite enjoy it because it's such a visceral reaction for me. And this book especially had to do with bugs, and specifically bugs that burrow into your skin. I'm getting shivers just talking about this. Oh my god. It was revolting to listen to as well, and it was so good. The main character is an illustrator and she works for I can never think of the word, but a guy that studies bugs for a living. He's a scientist and she illustrates his bugs for him. It's set in the late 1800s in the Appalachia region of the States, and it's full of weird mythology and strange creatures. I'm gonna leave that there because this was a pretty short book and there was lots about it that I didn't expect, so I don't want to spoil things by accident, but definitely pick this book up when it comes out, which I believe is at the end of March. My last 4.5 star was Common Goal by Rachel Reid, which was the 4th book in the Heated Rivalry series. This was very nearly a perfect romance book for me. It was an age gap romance, which I'm not usually a fan of, but in this case I didn't really mind it too much. Granted, that was my one critique of the book, was that the older character would not shut up about being old. He was just constantly talking about how old he is, even though he's only 41 years old, and also being a hockey player, he is in like peak physical health, but he's always talking about being old and decrepit as if he doesn't have like rippling six-pack abs, and it was a little bit irritating. I didn't mind it at first because I thought it was nice that he had some kind of like self-consciousness to him, and I thought it was an interesting part of his character, but it got way too much. It was like every couple of pages he was talking about how old he is, and it was a little annoying after a while. But otherwise, this was such a fantastic read. I loved the chemistry between these characters. I loved their story and how they communicated with each other. This one also went into a little bit of some BDSM, which was very fun. And I also love someone who is coming out later in life and kind of discovering himself, because the older character in this one, he was married for 20 years to a woman and they just recently got divorced, and he's now exploring being bi for the first time, and it was so much fun and heartwarming and so sweet. And yeah, I just loved this book so much. It was wonderful, which brings us to my 5 stars, which includes Heated Rivalry by Rachel Reid. This is of course my favorite book in this series so far. It is Shane and Ilya's story. They are the main characters of the TV show. If you have not watched it yet, you should definitely do that. It's amazing. This was incredible. I loved this so much, and yes, this is a very biased opinion because I am so obsessed with the TV show. There were definitely some things about this book that could have been improved, some awkward dialogue here and there, but I just loved it so much, and the reading experience was so wonderful that I had to give it 5 stars. Everything about this was my kind of romance. I loved just the very long time frame of the relationship and watching it bloom over time, and I especially loved with the book getting to hear their thoughts, mainly with Ilya, because in the show he's so closed off and you don't really get to see what he's thinking very much, and it was really nice to see a different side of him that was more soft and tender. I could honestly gush about this book forever. I loved it so much. I can't wait to get to book 6 in the series, which brings us back to these 2 characters. It's going to be wonderful, and I'm probably going to sob. And finally, my last book of the month was There Be Dragons Here by S.L. Rowland, which is the 4th book in the Tales from Adria series. This whole series has been amazing, but this 4th book was really something special. It followed our main character, who is an elderly dwarf. In her youth, she was this world-famous adventurer, but she's now been retired for the last 80 years. However, when her dear friend and leader of her former adventuring troupe passes away, he asks her in his will to go scatter his ashes. And of course, he asks her to go to the most dangerous place known to man, which is right in the middle of dragon territory. So she comes out of retirement for one last adventure to go say farewell to her friend, and is joined by her war goat and her granddaughter. This was such a lovely read. It was so beautiful. It made me cry on several occasions. It was hilarious and heartwarming and just so sweet and wonderful and tender, and I had a blast with this book. It was so good. Again, the whole series is fantastic, but this one especially. I love books that have elderly main characters. It felt like classic fantasy adventure novels, but way more inclusive, which is wonderful. This was just so perfectly my kind of book. There are plenty of queer characters in this world and people who are disabled, and just so many wonderful things wrapped up in this series. It's such a beautiful series and I highly recommend it. And yeah, this 4th book is easily my favorite in the whole series. It was wonderful and I had so much fun reading it, and I'm definitely going to read it again at some point. So before we wrap up, let's get into the superlatives, starting with best book of the month. And I can't decide between Heated Rivalry and There Be Dragons Here. They are both just so good that I'm going to pick both of them for this prompt. The worst book was definitely Our Monsters by Jemma Topaz. It was fun and entertaining, but objectively not a good book. The biggest surprise, I would say, is Small Spaces, because I did not expect to be that affected by a middle grade horror book. Biggest disappointment is Meet Me at the Crossroads, because I love portal fantasy, and I'm always really sad when I don't love a book like that. Most memorable? Heated Rivalry, of course. Most forgettable, I would say, is Heart of the Sun Warrior. I already fully forget every detail of that book, to be honest. Best audiobook is a tie between Walking Practice and Flamboyance by George Johnson, which I totally forgot to talk about, so I'm just gonna do that real quick. So my unrated book of this month was a nonfiction called Flamboyance by George M. Johnson, which is a nonfiction book on lesser known people from the queer Harlem Renaissance, and it was beautiful. The audiobook for this one had lots of music and sound effects, and it was stunning, so definitely recommend this one as well. And of course, Walking Practice was a phenomenal audiobook as well. And finally, the prettiest cover has to go to There Be Dragons Here. This cover is stunning. Oh my god, it's so beautiful. But yeah, that should do it for my February wrap up. Let me know down in the comments what your best or worst book of last month was, or if you've read any of the books that I have, let me know as well. I would love to hear your thoughts on them. But in the meantime, that'll do it for today's video, so thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having a fantastic day wherever you are in the world, and I'll catch you in the next video.